page 6. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan l'sakri bina, haskim ben uvein laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani bezomo. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani ben korim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, pokea irim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, zokeh kekufim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, rokach ha'azmayim. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asani li kol zoki. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, hamakim gaver. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, ozeh Yisrael bivorah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, otev Yisrael b'tifarah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten la'ya'ev kolah.
Amen.
Otanieh hayom v'kol yom lekeinu l'kesed rachamim, v'necha v'nei kol oreino, v'teti maleinu chasadim tovim, baruch atah Adonai, gomer chasadim tovim le'amo Yisrael.
Amen. You may be seated, page 7.
Yehi rasum v'fnecha Adonai. Ashreinu mato kakenu ma naim koraleinu ma lefa Yerushateinu Ashreinu she'anaknu mashkimim uma avivim erev aboker v'yomrim poemayim b'kol yom Shema
Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Wadesh Shmecha al Mikodesh Shmecha Mikodesh Shmecha Be'olamecha Uvishwadecha Teri Vital Bia Koreno Baruch atah Adonai Mikodesh Shmecha Be'orabim. Ki etem hekem l'Shem v'lihi tehila b'kol amei ha'aretz b'shuvim eshuvatechem l'nechem ama Adonai.
Rabbi Yishmael, page 12. Rabbi Yishmael, Mishash, Semidat, Tatarani Drashet.
V'kein shnei keruvim ha'mashkishim ze et ze asher yavo ha'katol v'shlishi v'yakriya v'nehem yehi rasom b'fnei Adonai Eloheinu v'lehev v'teinu shebnei bech hamikdash v'imheva v'imenu v'ten kakenu b'tordecha v'shamna decha b'yakim yorim kashnid kvad moniyot.
Kaddish Rabbanan, page 13. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
Me'omad ivara kirute v'yamlech machute. V'chayechon v'yomechon. V'chayeh dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv. V'yimeru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach. Ve'olam le'omei omeyah. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha Richu leila min kol birchata v'shirata Tishbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'oma v'yimeru. Amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidehon v'al kol Tamidehon v'al kol man de'oskim be'oraita di v'atra haden v'di v'cholatar v'atar Yehe lahon lachon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayhin arichin v'mizonat v'cha Ufurkana min kodam avohon divishmaya v'yimeru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav v'berachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen.
Mizmor
Shir Chanukah David.
Chanukah Bayit LeDavid.
Start the fanach.
Fakta misbedil mecholi pitakta saki watasarei simcha leman yisur merecha kivolo elod yudon Adonai Elohei ai leolam odecha.
Kaddish Chateau, Mourner's Kaddish, page 15. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'omad ivera kirute ve'yamlech malchute. V'chayechon ve'yomechon v'chayeh dechol Beit Yisrael. Va'agalau v'zman kori v'yimeru amen. Yehe Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam le'omei omeya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha. Brichu leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran be'oma v'yimeru. Amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Rise for the Baruch.
Please rise. Baruch Shamar, page 16.
Baruch Shamar v'hayar ha'olam. Baruch Oseh Bereshit. Baruch Oseh Mechayim. Baruch Merachem Habriyot. Baruch Hailad Vayacham Lenazeh. Baruch Shemo. Baruch Atan Aleinu Melech Olam. Yakiche Olamim Melech Meshubach Umevode Ashemo Hagalo. Baruch Atah Adonai Melech Mechula Batishbacho.
Amen. You may be seated, page 17.
Odul Adonai Kiroshemo Hadriyan. O Adonai Eloheinu V'kol Yichol He Halamim Lilim Adonai Shemayim Asa. Hold what had all if not, oh, keep a people more. Romu Adonai Eloheinu, Vishmu Leha Kosho, Ki Kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Weho Rachom, Yakapevahom, Lo Yol Ashki, Ashki, Venabashi, Mabon, Velo, Ayida Kaimato. Adonai Zavrod Ashrei, Adam Bote Akbach, Adonai Hoshia Hamelek Yaneno, Bion Koeno. Hoshiara meaka, Urehena Kalatekan Reminism alone. Wani bakdeaka batakti, Yageli bi Beshuateaka, Ashirala Ranai Kigama awai. Miss Moore Letoda, Hariala Ranai Kohares. Ki tov Adonai Olam Kasdo, Wado, Emunato. He Kavola, Adonai Olam, Yismakla Nai Bemasai, Hishim Ranai Meburak Meatava Olam. Weho Rakom, Yakapeawon, Welo Yashkid, Wihilabala Hashiapo, Welo Ya Ida Kamatol, Adonai Hoshia Malekine, no Bionka Eno.
Page 21, Ashrei.
Ashrei, Peteaka, Uluka Sela, Ramshamalo, Ramshamala, Hilarana Yadavepi, Bureko Basashem, Kashole Ulamet, Wa Nakno Neverek Ya, Meatava Olam, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Halina Shirana. Adonai Matira Surim, Adonai Puherim, Adonai Zokekaprim, Adonai Ohe Zurkim, Adonai Sheme Ekairim, Yoton we Almana, Ye Ode, we Dere, we Shaim, we Ye Awe, Yim Lokanelu Elohai, Zion, the door, what door, Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Tov Samara Hinu Kinamina, Atiala, on Israel, and I came Israel, Magi Devralia Ko Kukai Mishpatale Israelo Asa Kain Lako Goim Mishpatal Ba Yodom Hallelujah. 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 Naimi Hashemai Malu Banarim. Why you rank it in the more Tila Lako Kasida Lifne Israel Amkurovo. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Shuru and I she can sing all the Kasadim. There's so milk ham, but the cream, and they can bake all Vazel, La Sopa ham, Mishpakato, Hada Hole Call Katida, Hallelujah. We join together.
Middle of page 25. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Bekodsho. Hallelujah. Bekiyahuzo. Hallelujah. Vigvurotav. Hallelujah. Kirav good love. Hallelujah. Beteka shofar. Hallelujah. Ben never vechinor. Hallelujah. Betofu machol. Hallelujah. Beminim veugab. Hallelujah. Betzir tzle shama. Hallelujah. Betzir tzle chura. Kula nishama te hallelujah. Hallelujah. Kula nishama te hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Brukanel, all my main, the main Brukanel, hallelujah, Brukanel, hey, Israel. I'll say never over Brokshem, Kavodole, Olam, Yamelek of Edo, Kohares. Amen, we amen.
Please rise, page 26.
Why rek, Dawi, and an island, Kokaha, you made Dawi. Atahu Adonai Halim Asher Bakata Avram Zoltevo Me Urkastim Me Samta Shemo Abraham Zata Et Levavor Neman Lefaneaka
Becharati Mohabri.
Wahayam Kurta Lifnehem Waya Avuro Beto Hayamba Yabasha ואברו פהם והיש לטה וזולול כמו אבן בימים עזים. ויהיה ישראל היה גדולו ואשר עשה אדוני מצרים מעירו העם את אדוני ויאמינו באדוני ומשה עבדו.
אז יש משה ונעשה לזרזות
Anai milok leolamay, anai milok leolamay. Kila denai hameluka mishale bagoim wa alu mushaim. Bahazion lishpon et ha esa. Vayatala denai miluka, but hayar denai lemelek okares. Bayon ha hu ye denai akad. Ushemo ekad.
Yeshikoach. Friends, for leading us in Psuke de Zimra. Maury, would you like to daven? We'll continue at the top of page 29.
Yishtabah Shimcha la'ad malkeinu, ha'el ha'melech ha'gagadosh, b'shamayim uva'aretz, ki lechana Adonai Eloheinu v'le'avatenu, shir shvacha ha'lav zimra, oz memshala netzakiru la'gvura, tilab tifer kusha malchut, brachot v'hoda'o me'ata v'erolam, baruch ata Adonai, el melech gadol batishbachot, el ha'adad Adonai flaot, Habocher b'shirei zimra, melech achei ha'olami, mikadav v'kadash merabah, ve'amad v'rachirte ve'amlich malchute, b'chayechonu v'yemechonu v'chaycho b'Yisrael, b'galav v'zman kari v'meru amen. Yehesh v'rabam v'orach le'lom v'amayah, yibarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yishmam v'naseh, v'dadav v'dalev v'dalav sh'mekidusha b'richu, le'elam v'korchata v'shirata, tishbechata v'nechmata, damiram v'amav v'meru amen. Baruchu et Adonai ha'mevorach. Baruch ha'mevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam yotzer v'rei choshech oseh shalom v'rei atakol.
May be seated, page 30.
Tibarach le'malch asher masei yadecha v'amrei ohor shatzi afrucha tzela. Tibarach tzir malkeinu v'go aleinu. Kulam avim, kulam berurim, kulam giurim, v'kulam osim, v'sarutzon konam, v'kulam porchim epihem b'kedushav tahara, v'shirav v'zimram v'archim v'shavchim farim maritzim v'makdishim v'mamlechim. Et Shema el HaMelech HaGadol v'Hagibor HaKadosh Hu v'kulam mekablim alechem ol malchut shamayim zeh mizeh v'nonim reshut zeh lazeh le'atish ha'otzam v'nacha ruach v'safar v'ravnu makdusha kulam kecharonim v'omrim v'yirah Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot Melech Haaretz Kevoto v'chonim v'chayot HaKadosh Barash Kodom Nasim L'matzarafim L'mutam Shabchim v'omrihim Baruch Adonai mimkomo el Baruch nimotitenu. Or Chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkechu lana me'ra le'oro. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer me'oro.
And page 32.
V'havienu leshalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyut le'artzenu Ki el poel Yeshuot atav v'anu v'acharta mikolam v'lashon V'kerav tanu l'shimcha hagadol sela behemet lehodo lecha uyachecha be'ahava Baruch atah Adonai bocher b'amo Yisrael be'ahava Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad L'mahan tizkeru v'asitem ekom mitzvotai b'tim kedoshim l'loechem ani anoechem asher hotzeti etchem meretz Mitzrayim liot lachem l'Elohim ani anoechem anoechem emet Dov ador kayam shmo kayam v'kisur machoto v'noto liad kayamed Emet shata Adonai Eloheinu avotenu malkeinu melech avotenu gorlenu goel avotenu yotzernu tzur shoatenu potenu matzeler melam shemecha Elohim zulatecha Ezrat avotenu atahu me'olam.
After we conclude the bracha at the bottom of page 35, we'll continue with our own individual Amidah prayers silently on the following pages.
Kilo lelo yom baruch umvorach Moshe uvnei Yisrael echanu shirav simcha rabah ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai mi chamocha nadar ba'kodesh norati lo tosef eleh shirach rashashim kugilim l'shimcha svatayam yachad kulam hodivim l'chu ve'ameru
Please rise.
Zur Yisrael Kuma ve'ezrat Yisrael Uftechinu mecha Yudav Yisrael Go'alenu Adonai tzavaot shemo kedosh Yisrael Baruch atah Adonai Yisrael
Please continue with your own silent prayer if you have not finished. We remain standing as we turn back to page 36A for the Chazarat HaShatz.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Eloi Avotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Norah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKov V'Zocher Chasdei Avot U'Mevi Goel Livnei Vneihem L'man Shemo B'Ahava Melech Ozer Moshiach Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Abraham Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayim Etim Atah Rav Le'Hoshia Mashiva Ruach Morid Hagashem Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechayim Etim B'Rachamim Rabim Somech Noflim V'Rofech Cholim Matir Asurim Kayem Emunato L'Shanei Afar Michamocha Ba'agivurot U'Midom Elach Melech Memet Umchayeh U'Matzmiach Yeshua V'Ne'eman Atah L'Chachayot Metim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayeh HaMetim Nekadesh Shemcha Ba'olam Keshem Shemachti Oto B'Shmei Marom Kakatuv Al Yad Nevi'echa V'Karazeh El Zeh Ve'Amahar Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Haaretz Kevodo, Olam Atam Baruch Yom Meru. Baruch Kevod, Adonai Mimkomo, Divrei Kodecha Katuv Lemor. Yimloch Le'olam Elohayich Zion L'dor Vador Hallelujah, L'dor Vador Nagigod Lecha, L'netzach Netzachim Kishacha Nakti Ish, V'shivchacha Eloheinu Pino Le'amush Le'olam Va'ed, Ki HaMelech Kadol V'Kadosh Atah, Baruch atah Adonai.
Amen. You may be seated, page 38.
Atah chonen l'adam da'at u'melamed le'enosh bina chanemet chadav yaskel Baruch atah Adonai chonen hada'at hashivenu avinu l'toratecha v'karvenu malkeinu l'votecha v'hachazirenu b'tshuva sh'lefanecha Baruch atah Adonai harotzeh b'tshuva slachanu v'kichatanu v'chalanu v'chalkenu kifashanu kimocho v'saleach atah Baruch atah Adonai chanun hamarbe lisloach re'en averinu v'rarivenu gelenu mira l'man shemecha ki goel chazak atah Baruch atah Adonai goel Yisrael rafa'enu ananu v'nerafeh Hoshienu v'nim Hasheach, ki tolatenu atah, v'aleh refuah shlema l'chol makotenu, ki hamelech rofeh ne'eman v'rachaman atah, Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh cholei amo Yisrael. Baruch Aleinu Adonai Eloheinu et hashana hazot ve'ekronet v'atal tovah v'ten tal matar livracha al pnei adama v'samini v'rav v'resh notenu kashanim atofot Baruch atah Adonai mevarech hashanim tekab b'shavar gadol l'cheretiv v'sam nes l'kabetz gilotenu v'kabsenu yacham erba kavot ha'aretz Baruch atah Adonai mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael Hashiv ha'shoftenu k'vershona v'yotzenu k'matchila v'yaser miminu yagom menacha umloch Aleinu atah Adonai l'vadcha b'chesed rachamim tzakei b'mishpat Baruch atah Adonai melech ohev tzedakah u'mishpat v'l'mashanim atihi tikva v'chol risha k'rega toveh v'chol oiveh merai karetu v'zedim merat haker u'tchaper maker v'tachniya b'merav yameinu Baruch atah Adonai shover oivim machnia zedim al tzadikim v'al chasidim v'al ziknei amcha beit Yisrael Ve'al pleitat tzavrehem, ve'al girei tzedek ya'alenu, yemun arachamecha Adonai Eloheinu v'tzen tzar tov, lechol habotchim b'shimcha be'emet, v'simcha kenu mahem u'lolam, lo nevosh ki v'cha b'tachnu, Baruch atah Adonai, mishan v'vtach l'tzadikim, v'Yerushalayim ircha b'rachamim tashu, v'tishkom b'tcha kasher dibarta, uvnei otah v'karov, ve'abenu binyan olam, v'hichsed David merat ha'chatachin, Baruch atah Adonai, bonei Yerushalayim, את צמח דוד עבדך מרת הצמיח וקרנות תרם בשבועתך כי בשבועתך כביר כל היום ברוך אתה אדוני מצמיח קרן ישועה שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו חוס ורחם עלינו וקבל ברחמים ורצון תפילתנו כי אל שומע תפילות ותחנונים אתה מלפניך מלכנו רקם אל תשיבנו כי אתה שומע תפילת עמך ישראל ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני שומע תפילה רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל תפילתם והשב את עבדה לביר ביתך ותפילתם בעבד תקבל ברצון ותהי לרצון תמיד עבדת ישראל עמך תחזינה עינינו ותשמע לצום ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון מודים אנחנו לך שאתה אדוני אלוהינו לעולם ועד צור חיים מישוע אתה הוא לדור ודור נודה לך בתפילתך על חיינו המסירים בידיך ואל נשמתנו הפדו לך ואני זכה שבכל יום עמנו אנו פלותיך וטובתך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים הטוב כי לך לרחמך ואמרחם כי לא תמוך לעשות מעולם כי נלך ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכין תמיד לעולם ועד וכל החיים יודוך סלע ויעלו את שמך באמת האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך חנה להודות
Amen.
אלוהינו ולאלוהינו ברכנו ברכם שולשת בתורה הכתובה על ידי משה עבדך האמורה מפי אהרון ובניו כהנים עם קדושך כאמור יברכך אדוני וישמרך
כן יהי רצון.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך
כן יהי רצון.
אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום
כן יהי רצון.
עם שלום בעולם טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו בכל ישראל עמך ברכנו אבינו כי לנו ככה באור פניך כי באור פניך נתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו תורת חיים ואהבת חסד וצדקה ברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום וטוב בעיניך לברך למך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הבורך את עמו ישראל בשלום
Amen. We continue to omit Tachanan through the balance of Nisan, and we'll continue with Chatzi Kaddish, page 47.
יתקרא ויקדש מרבה, ואמן וחרצה וימליך מלכותה, בחייכון ובמלכון ישראל, בגל זמן קריב, ויברו אמן.
Amen. Yehi Shema V'Barach Le'Olam
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ונעשה וידע וידעלה וידעלה ושמי קדושה בריחו לעילם מקורקתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמרם בעמها וימרו אמן.
We'll continue to add the prayer for peace as the situation in Ukraine continues to be dire. Please join me as we read in English on page 75 toward the bottom. May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world. Then nation will not threaten nation, and mankind will not again know war. For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love. Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion. Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture. I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen. Ashrei, page 78. Ashrei shevetecha u'chasela. We omit Lam Natseach on Erev Pesach and continue on page 80. There's Kadosh Kadosh, and that's what the Charetz Kavod. Baruch Kavod L'Nem Kavod.
יפתחו וכן שמך כי לא עזת ראשך אדוני אדוני חפץ למען ציד כה יגדיל תורה ויאדיר.
Kaddish Shalem.
יקדל ויקדש מרבה ועמד ברכיותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון ובחיי ישראל Bagalav Isman Kariv Imru Amen.
Amen. Yehi Shmir Abam Rach Le'olam Elomei Omaya.
Barach Vishabach Vipar Vichum Amnaseh Vidajav Vidalav Vidalav Shmekir Shap
Brichu.
Le'elam Mikbarkatav Shirata Tishbechatav Nechmata Dam Ram Yamav Imru Amen.
Amen.
Tika Beltzam Kondecho Yisrael Kadam Avuhund Vishmaya Vimru Amen.
Amen.
Yehesh Rabab Min Shmaya V'chaim Alen V'ko Yisrael Vimru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom Biramav Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Alen V'ko Yisrael Vimru Amen.
Amen. Please rise. Alenu, page 83.
Leinu leshabeach ladon hakol latet gdula leotze breshit shelo asanu koye aratzot velo samanu kimishbechot adama shelo sam chelkenu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol amonam Ve'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim ve'yosed haaretz umoshav yekaro b'shamayim imam Ushchinatu zo, begove meromim, hu Eloheinu enod. Enod, Malchut shachayim le'otim lach b'chavok, katuv b'toratech, anayim lach le'olam va'ed. V'nemar v'haya Adonai, le'melech al kol haaretz. V'yom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo
With fondness and affection, we recall those members of our community, their family and friends whose Yortzites occurred today, the 14th of Nisan. We remember Alan Ballatin, Henry Moses, Joe Newman, Simon Selber, Fanny Kagan, Yetta Platt, Shelby Harold Traeger, Bonnie Stachersky, Marilyn Safer, May Goldie Stillman, Sophie Spivak-Witten, Edna Reich, Sophie Isaacs, and Nathan Victor Gross. Yehi Zichron Baruch, may our memories of the departed bring comfort and strength. May they rest in peace. Amen. Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish, page 84. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah. Me'alma divra kirute v'yamlech malchute. B'chayechon v'yomechon. V'chayeh dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agalau v'zman kori v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah mevorach. Le'alam le'omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tishbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'olma v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen. Shir Shoyom, the Psalm for Friday, page 90.
Yom shishi v'shavat shabo
We conclude with Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish, found again on page 84. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Me'amad ivara kirute v'yamlech malchute, v'chayechon v'yomechon, u'v'chayeh dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam u'le'omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha. Brechu leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tishbechata v'nechamata. Damiran bi'oma v'yimeru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Shakoach to Maury Sefer for leading us in Shaharit, to Prince Ben Yehuda for leading us in Psukei de Zimra. We'll continue in a moment with the siyyum as we finish the tractate Arakhin. There are sheets right on the book cart with the weekday sidurim. So if you'd like to help yourself or pass out the sheets, that would be great. We also have our pushka. If folks want to give tzedakah. Somebody had mistakenly put it on the coffee cart. I think they were assuming this was for the cost of coffee, but it's not. The coffee's free. For those who haven't had a chance yet to sell their chametz, this is your last opportunity. At 9:15 this morning, I'm going to use my power of attorney that's been granted to me by everyone who's designated me as their representative to sell their chametz. And our buyer is our Director of Security, Brad Elgin. And so that's who will be owning your boxes of Cheerios, at least for the next 8 days. Before we get started, I just want to say how nice it is to see Maury again. Maury comes down with his wife Rachel not every, but many a Pesach. And for you to daven, Maury, on the yortzeit of your grandmother, I know would have been a source of nachas for her. And that we always study Torah on her yortzeit, because it coincides with the fast of the firstborn, is also meaningful, given how important Jewish education was. So, a word about the act of the siyyum. The fast of the firstborn is not a communal fast. It seems pretty self-evident because it only applies to a portion of the community, those who are firstborn. According to the medieval codes, it is actually a fast that applies to both male and female firstborn. It's not the only view, but it's the one that, as an egalitarian community, we follow. For what its its practical value is, it's not like we have so many firstborns coming to the siyyum or fasting otherwise today. But if you are the firstborn of a mother or firstborn of a father, right? How could you be one but not the other? Well, in cases of a second marriage. This fast would apply to you, and it is in remembrance of God's killing of the Egyptian firstborn, the 10th plague. There are some of my colleagues who have argued that it is a fast worthy of observing because it carries with it a reminder of the moral implications, that redemption is not something that's neat, easy, free of, if you will, collateral damage sometimes. But be that as it may, it is Erev Pesach. It's a day of joy otherwise, of making arrangements for the Seder. And of course, it doesn't apply to the majority of people. So the institution of having a siyyum on that day grew out of the Middle Ages and has become common practice today. If nothing else, it's an opportunity to finish a tractate of study, which is always a good thing, and to participate in a siyyum. The seudat mitzvah, literally a meal that is commanded. It is a mitzvah to have some sort of celebratory meal after concluding a tractate of Talmud, either the Mishnah or the Gemara. And one can participate vicariously if you are present at the completion, even though you have not studied the tractate along with the person who is completing. You are still able to join in the celebration as well. So for the course of the past month, I have been studying the Mishnah of Masekhet Arakhin, which I'll talk about in a moment. And this morning I will conclude my study, and we will recite the special Hadran prayer said at the end of concluding a tractate of study, and then the Kaddish de siyyum, the special form of Kaddish that is only said at the completion of a tractate. So the Masachet, the tractate Arachin, is based largely, not exclusively, but largely on the laws of Vayikra Perek Kaf Zayin, Leviticus chapter 27. It's the last chapter of the book of Leviticus, and it talks there about vows of valuation, what we call arachin. Erech in Hebrew means value with an ayin. And it also contains laws about redemption of property, particularly for the Levi'im, for the Levites. That will be the focus of the very end of the tractate, so I'll leave that aside for the moment. But the Torah allows for a rather interesting way of donating, creating a sense of value to the sanctuary, right? To make something consecrated. What if you want to donate yourself, right? You can't donate yourself. In theory, we do. We ransom, or rather redeem, our firstborn. If you are the male firstborn of a woman who is born naturally, not by C-section, And there are all sorts of terms and conditions about what constitutes a pet Arakhin, literally one who opens the womb. But even there, you redeem that child at the age of 1 month when he actually reaches the age of redemption. Because a child under a month does not yet have a value. And I want to be very careful here when we talk about value. We're not talking about emotional value. We're not talking about the value of a life. That is priceless. The Torah does not put a price on the value of human life. This is an instrument solely for donations to the sanctuary, to the temple. If you wanted to give the value of yourself to the sanctuary, this is a means of creating a way of doing it. But that is its only significance. So I think it's important we not take that out of context. It's not to say, somebody is worth 5 shkalim, 10 shkalim, 20 shkalim. This is only when an individual is donating his value for the sake of these vows of valuation or the value of somebody else. I could take a vow and say, I want to donate the value of Neil Gordon. Right? Anybody, Wendy Honigman. It doesn't matter. So it's not just yourself, but it could be anybody. And the Torah creates a schedule of such valuation. That's basically a matter of caloric output. So it's a combination. It's of age and sex. And it's based on just an objective, it has nothing to do with the individual, all right? So let's say you want to donate the value of a healthy 50-year-old versus somebody who, is suffering, maybe is crippled, doesn't matter. That person, if they fall into a particular category of age or sex, then that's the erech, and that is what you would donate to the temple. There is, however, another way of donating value, and that is what we call an assessment. All right? It is a neder. It is a type of vow. And there, it's based entirely on the individual circumstances. So I want to donate to the sanctuary, not, let's say, Herschel Bettman's, not his erech, which is dependent solely on his age and his sex, but what his value would fetch if he were being sold as a slave in the market. And there, a Kohen would have to actually evaluate Herschel. What are your skills? How strong are you? Can you pick this up? What can you do? What sort of talents do you have? That is an individual valuation made on the basis of Herschel's capacities as, again, this is not, nobody's being sold as a slave. This is a way of determining a value. I wish to pledge to the temple Herschel Walker's, not his valuation, that would be the erech, but an assessment based on his individual talents and skills. Okay, any questions so far before we delve into the Mishnah? This is the 5th tractate in the order of Kodashim. Kodashim is deals largely with things that have to do with the temple. Keep in mind the Mishnah was compiled, redacted 140 or so years after, but all knowledge in Judaism is sacred. You know, if it is a sacred writing, it is preserved. It doesn't go before the committee of relevance. And this was a way of preserving information about temple practices. Obviously, this whole system doesn't exist in the absence of a temple. So this is not a current practice. You could say, I want to donate, Mori Sefer's Erech, right? And you go back to Leviticus chapter 27 and say, okay, he's this age, he's male. Okay, I'm going to donate that. You can do that, okay? But it does not, it's not the literal fulfillment of creating money that is consecrated for one use and one use only as a gift to the temple, because there is no temple that exists. Okay, so let's go right into the text. If everybody has a sheet, we'll do a couple of there's some very interesting materials in here, but we'll just do a little bit of a smorgasbord, a little sampling, and then conclude with the last passage of Masekhet Arakhin. Okay? I'll take off my glasses for this. Hakol ma'arichin ve'ne'erachim, nodrim ve'nidarim, kohanim, uleviyim ve'yisraelim, nashim ve'avadim. Okay, everyone can take a vow of valuation and is thereby obligated to donate to the temple treasury the fixed value, the value fixed by the Torah. You can go back and look at Leviticus chapter 7, right? The value is fixed on the basis of age and sex. And similarly, everyone can be valuated for the sake of donating to the temple. And so one who vowed to donate his fixed value is obligated to pay. Okay. By the same token, everyone who vows to donate to the temple, the assessment of a person, okay? The assessment is that individual factoring on the basis of strength, skills, and other factors. So if you take a vow, a formal vow, to donate to the temple treasury, the assessment of a person, right? What is that based on? Quote unquote, his market value, right? If he were to be sold as a slave, no one is being sold anywhere. You are obligated to pay. Remember, you're taking a vow, you're swearing in God's name. This is serious business. Tumtum v'androgynous, androgynous, right? There are Greek words that do appear in the Mishnah and the Gemara. So tumtum v'androgynous nodrim v'nidarim ma'arichin aval lo ne'erachin she'eno ne'erach ela zachar v'adai u'nekeva v'adait. Okay. A tumtum, this is an individual, and I should say these are not issues of gender identity or gender orientation. These are purely biological designations. All right, so a tumtum is an individual whose sexual organs are concealed. It's not, in terms of physical development, it's not clear that this person is either male or female. An androgynous, a hermaphrodite, is somebody who has signs of being both. But what we are discussing here is, again, the physical, not the identification of the individual. A tumtum can see himself, herself, themself as either male or female or non-binary. The self-definition is up to the individual. This is where there is a certain doubt based on purely physical phenomena. In such cases, these are individuals who can take vows of valuation for others, like I'm going to donate the value of somebody else, the valuation of another individual, but they themselves cannot give their own valuation. Why? Because the language of the Torah is pretty clear that the valuation schedule is based on male or female. So it has to be somebody who is either, again, physically male or physically female. Just as an aside, in the conservative movement today, for instance, where we deal with we deal with in halakha matters of gender dysphoria. If somebody identifies as a woman, we identify that person as a woman. However, if that individual still had a penis, that person would need, and say was converting to Judaism, would need to have a brit milah. And that's based not on the identification of gender, but simply on equipment. However, when it comes to the other kind of the assessment, where it is an individual's strengths, skills, et cetera, that has nothing to do with the erech of a person, there somebody who is an androgynous or tumtum can be assessed and also assess others and give on the basis of strength and skills, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. A person who is, and again, we have to accept the fact that the Mishnah was written in a different age. So for us today, the next passage in particular may be a difficult one. A deaf mute, a mentally disabled individual, and a minor are the object of a vow and are evaluated, but they do not vow to donate the assessment, and they do not take a vow of evaluation. Right? Why? If somebody cannot speak, if somebody is mentally disabled, and a minor, and again, we're putting categories together. Today, obviously, we would not want to put somebody who is a deaf mute, but otherwise fully cognizant of circumstances in the same category. But in the Talmud, this just was the way it was 2,000 years ago. So if it is presumed that a person doesn't have full, if a person is non compos mentis, somebody doesn't have, full ability to actually make a vow, then that person cannot take one. However, he or she can be the object of somebody else who is giving the individual's valuation, which again depends only on age and sex. A child less than 1 month old is the object of a vow if others vow to donate his assessment. Now, this shows you how theoretical it is. How do you assess the value of a child that's, less than a month old? I have no idea. But in theory, you could, but you could not make a vow of valuation for a child less than 1 month, because the Torah is very clear that vows of valuation only kick in from the age of 1 month and up. By the way, this is also connected to the idea of when we redeem the firstborn, right? It's very, there's a reason why it's a month. Okay, the third Mishnah of the chapter, Hagoses v'hayotze lehareg, a little grisly, one who is on the verge of death, one who is taken to be executed after being sentenced by the court, cannot be the object of a vow or evaluated. The idea is that somebody's going to be, if you will, schmeist, executed in the space of minutes. So what is that person's value? Now, who would want to donate that valuation? I don't know. These are theoretical questions, and that's what the Talmud and the Mishnah so often do. These are theoretical contrasts rather than, case law where this happened and that happened and this was the ruling. Rabbi Chanina ben Akavia says he is not the object of a vow because he has no market value, right? He's about to be executed. But he is valuated. If somebody is alive, I can't assess his skills and strength because he'll be executed in a few minutes. But however, so long as that person is alive, he does have that objective valuation according to the schedule determined by the Torah in Leviticus 27. So 10 minutes before the execution, I can say, I'm going to give the value of so-and-so, the erech of so-and-so to the temple, which would be, again, strictly based on age and sex. Somebody who is about to be executed can donate the assessment of another person to the temple treasury. In my last few minutes, I can say, I'd like to donate the assessment of Rabbi Weider. That's what I'm doing with my last few minutes on earth. So then, Rabbi Weider would get assessed his strengths and skills as an individual, and then that I would have to pay that amount, and then off I go to be stoned or... Okay. We're going to go on to chapter 3, the bottom of page 2. Any questions so far? Oh. No. No. Go ahead, Prince. You can do a vow of assessment, but not evaluation. Because if physically that person is both or neither, the Torah is the language is clear that it's the valuation scheme is based on male or female. That's not a judgment. It's just. Tum, yeah. Yeah. No, there's no there's no vow evaluation that can be made. A vow of assessment, sure, because that's purely an individual. Okay. Chapter 3, this is the 5th Mishnah. Hamotzi shem ra lahakel ulahachmir ketzad. Echad shotzi shem ra al gedola shabekuna ve'al ktana shabeyisrael noten me'asala. Nimtzahu omer befiv yeter min ha'oseh ma'aseh sheken matzinu shelo nechtam gzar din al avotenu babin bar ela al lashon hara shene'amar v'inasu oti ze eser pe'amim v'lo sham'u b'koli. Okay, we're on page 3. Arakhin, by the way, in the Gemara, not in the Mishnah so much, has a lot of beautiful and rich source material on the prohibition of lashon hara. So in the Talmud, it is one of the most extensive discussions about the prohibition of slander and gossip, and it all flows out of this particular Mishnah. There are laws with regard to a defamer who falsely claims that his bride was not a virgin. All right, again, we're talking about an era where virginity was prized above all else in an unmarried woman. So here is somebody, a defamer, comes back, right? And remember that in antiquity, wedding parties were a week long. And so they get married, they go off to the bedchamber, all of the guests are celebrating. Suddenly the groom appears and says, "This woman was not a virgin." Right? Presumably, if she were, then there would be some spotting, some blood on the sheet. Now, he has just made a very serious claim. Now, if it turns out that it's a false claim, he is punished. Right? In fact, it's a very, very stiff fine that is imposed upon him. The defamer who falsely claims that his bride was not a virgin, there are certain aspects that are lenient and some that are stringent. We'll see as opposed to what in just a moment. How so? One who defamed a young woman, it doesn't matter if she is the most prominent in the priesthood, right? She went to cotillion. She is, the belle of the ball. She is from the number one family in the community. Or she is the lowliest among the Israelites. It doesn't matter. The penalty is the same. You defame a young woman's reputation, accusing her of marital infidelity right after her wedding night. The penalty is 100 selah, which is, 100 shekels. And that fine is stated in the Torah. It's a pretty hefty fine. And in fact, it is twice the sum of what an individual would pay if he were a seducer or a rapist. Now, again, we are talking in antiquity. What is important for us to remember is that these were ways that the Torah is both a product of a certain time and age, but also a product of something more timeless. But sometimes it expresses that timelessness in terms and values that are specific to the age in which it was being formulated. So the idea with the Torah and its laws are not being based on feelings, but on legal and financial consequences. So that in the Torah, what's the difference, by the way, between a seducer and a rapist? In both cases, the woman is single. The seducer, in such a case, right, this is without a marital contract or payment. He seduces a woman, and now she is no longer a virgin. He must pay 50 shkalim to the father, and the father can refuse the match. And he still has to pay, he has to marry the young woman because, again, he now has become financially responsible for her. So he has to marry the young woman. However, there is a right to refuse the marriage offer, and either way, the seducer still has to pay 50 shkalim, whether there is marriage or not. The rapist, right, where it's clearly coercive, has to also pay 50 shkalim. In that particular case, he marries the young woman. Again, we're not thinking in emotional terms here. He has taken on the obligation and responsibility of her care and support because she is no longer, doesn't have that same marriageability. And this is crucial, he loses the right to ever divorce her. She must be supported by him for the remainder of her life. So while we may have certain qualms about based on the feelings of the victim here, the Torah is primarily concerned that the person who committed these transgressions assume responsibility and obligation for that person's care and support. Brins? Yeah, that's different. That is if she is married. And this is a case of a single woman, right? That's a different law if a woman is married and raped, and whether it happened, in the city where it's crowded or versus in a secluded place. But that's different than this. Right, but this is not that. This is not that case. So I want to just stick to the case at hand. But what's interesting here is that the crime of defaming a reputation, the monetary penalty is greater, twice as high, and somebody who has been, whose action has been physical. And so the point here that the Mishnah is making, we're toward the middle of page 3. It is apparent that one who utters malicious speech with his mouth is a more severe transgressor than one who performs an action, right? And this is corroborated, as we found, that the sentence imposed on our ancestors in the wilderness was sealed only due to the malicious speech disseminated by the spies. When the Israelites worshipped the golden calf, was God angry? Absolutely. But they were not punished with being told that that generation would die in the wilderness. The more severe punishment only came about when the spies had spread their malicious report among the people that they lost hope and wanted to turn back to Egypt. And so the Torah is connecting, just as the defamer is punished in a monetary sense more severely, a malicious speech sometimes is does more damage than physical action. Is there a question or? The individuals, yes. I mean, there was, yes, a plague of 3,000. I didn't say they weren't punished, but Moshe made them drink. But here the entire people, a whole generation, has said, that's it, you're not entering the promised land. So it was, the culpability was borne by everybody who had been born into slavery in Egypt. Those who were, young and had been born in the wilderness, not. And there is just, if you look in the green area, the first one, it is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Elazar ben Parata said, "Come and see how great the power of malicious speech is." From where do we derive this? From the punishment received by the spies. If one who defames the wood and rocks of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, receives such a severe punishment, then how much more so with regard to one who defames another person? All right, let's move right along. Chapter 5, the second Mishnah. We have 2 more. What if you want to donate the valuation of your forearm? Okay, I'm sorry, the assessment, right? I want to assess the value of my forearm, right? And that, again, will depend on individual factors. What can you do with your hands? How strong are your arms, right? The court appraises, the Bet Din appraises him, and how much is he worth with a forearm, how much is he worth without one, and then, he pays the difference between the two. Okay? However, let's say I want to donate the valuation of my forearm. There is no valuation of a forearm, because the Torah has a schedule of valuation based on age and sex alone. So my forearm, to say I am donating the value, not the assessment, but the value of my forearm, I haven't said anything. Now, if I say I want to donate my valuation, my erech, and then I die, my heirs have to go and fulfill that vow. It becomes, the obligation does not die with me. My heirs are required to give the value of my valuation based on age and sex to the Beit HaMikdash, to the sanctuary. However, one who says, I am going to donate my assessment, right, but then dies, his heirs do not need to fulfill that vow. It dies with him. They don't have to take money from the estate to pay the temple treasury, because why? The assessment when it comes to paying is there is no value for the dead. My assessment is based on my value as, right? We saw this with a person about to be executed as well. So if I'm already dead, there's no, you can't value my strength and skills and then make that donation. So that does get canceled should the individual die. Now, what if you say, I want to give the valuation of my head, my liver? In those cases, I have to give the valuation of my entire self. Why? This is the principle. If I want to give the valuation of a part of my body that I can't live without, then I give the valuation of my entire body. So if I say I want to give the value of my forearm, the valuation of my forearm, I've said nothing. If I say I want to give the valuation of my head, my liver, my heart, I pay with my valuation in age and sex. Why? Because if I were to lose those organs, I would lose my life. So it's like saying I'm valuating my whole being. Okay, let's go to the next page. We're on page 5. A person can valuate on the basis of pretty much anything. This is, any kind of vow. I can give the value of my flocks, cattle, right? Canaanite slaves and maidservants. Hebrew servants are a different story because they are indentured to pay off debts, but they are not, slaves. However, what I cannot do is to dedicate and give away all of my property. And I think that's important, that as important as tzedakah is, as critical as commanded and obligated, the idea that we give away everything and then become a public charge or a burden to others is not, Judaism does not know from vows of poverty or extreme asceticism. All right, so a person should spare his property, not give it all to others, because you still need to support yourself. And being self-supporting is it's the very essence of dignity. Okay, now we're at the last Mishnah. We'll conclude the tractate here. Yisrael sheyarash avi imo Levi eno goel kaseder hazeh. V'chein Levi sheyarash et avi imo Yisrael eno goel kaseder hazeh. Shene'emar ki vatei arei haleviim ad sheyehe Levi uve'arei haleviim divrei Rabbi. V'chachamim omrim ein hadavarim amurim ela ve'arei haleviim ela ve'arei haleviim. Ein osim sadeh migrash velo migrash sadeh velo migrash ir velo ir migrash. Amar Rabbi Eliezer bamed divarim amurim be'arei haleviim. Aval be'arei Yisrael osin sadeh migrash velo migrash sadeh. Migrash ir velo ir migrash. Kedei shelo yacharivu et arei Yisrael. HaKohanim v'halevim mochrim le'olam v'go'alim le'olam shene'emar gi'ulat olam tiyeh la'leviim. Now, the Levites do not receive an inheritance of land. There are, however, 48 Levitical cities spread out all around the land of Israel. 6 of them are cities of refuge, which we'll leave aside for the moment, but they are Levitical cities. Total of 48. Now, the Leviim were given these towns to live in, spread out among the 12 tribes. But because they're not given an ancestral portion, the laws applying to them and their ownership as Leviim is somewhat different. So, according to Torah law, in the Jubilee year, any sales that are made of land revert to the original owner. It's a reset. Really, you're buying what you're buying is not the land, but the number of harvests that land will produce until it's returned to the original person, clan, and tribe at the Jubilee year. When it comes to urban property, however, in cities, a person, an Israelite, not a Levi or a Kohen, an Israelite who purchases or who sells a piece of property, a house, let's say, he has a year. I can redeem it and say, here, you know what? I sold it to you, but this is, this is my window of opportunity to redeem it and, pay it off and buy it back. If, however, the Israelite does not take advantage of that, the property is sold forever. It is not returned in the Jubilee year. Fields, right? Land is, but not houses in cities. For Leviim, however, that land is always redeemable. It will come back to, that house is always redeemable. It can be redeemed at any time. It automatically is redeemed in the Jubilee year, but if not, the Levi can buy it back at any time. So Levites are given the power of redeeming property that Israelites don't have. On the other hand, Israelites have inherited property that is given by God to their, based on, right? It's all in Joshua chapter 21, how the land is divided between the tribes. So they get to keep the land and it comes back to them. Okay? So now let's look at the Mishnah's translation. This is page 6. An Israelite who inherited a house in a walled city from his mother's father who was a Levite. Okay, so this guy is an Israelite. His father was an Israelite, but his maternal grandmother was a Levite. And obviously, he didn't have a male heir, so his daughter inherited, and then her son, who is an Israelite, because that's patrilineal, goes to the father. So what do you do when you have an Israelite whose grandfather was a Levite, right, who inherits a house in a walled city? We won't go into, walled cities and what makes them different than unwalled cities. All right. He may redeem it always like a Levite. And likewise, a Levite who inherited a house in a walled city from his mother's father, who was an Israelite, here, his maternal grandfather is an Israelite, but he himself is a Levite because his father was, does not redeem the house in accordance with the procedure delineated in the previous Mishnayot, right? So here are these two cases. An Israelite whose grandfather was a Levite whose grandfather was an Israelite. So what is the law? And it now quotes the Torah from Leviticus chapter 25. And if a man purchases from the Levites the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall go free during the Jubilee year, as the houses of the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. Okay, well, does that really clarify? And the answer is no. Because the question is, well, what makes it What makes it different? Is it because it's in a Levitical city? Or is it because the person, redeeming it is a Levite? Or both? So according to Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who is the redactor of the Mishnah, the ability to always redeem the house of a Levite doesn't apply unless the one selling the house is a Levite and the house is located in a Levitical city, right? One of these 48 cities. That's Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. But his is an individual opinion. The law follows the sages. These matters are stated only with regard to a house in the cities of the Levites, even if the owner was not a Levite. So in other words, the exceptions that apply only in Levitical cities, right? That ability to redeem a property forever or to get it back during the Jubilee year. If it's in a Levitical city, regardless who the owner is, that's fine. If it's not in a Levitical city, the fact that somebody is a Levi doesn't matter. Or to put it differently, what determines which law? The general law or the Levitical law? Place, not person. Okay? The Levites, as we know from the Torah, in addition to their Levitical city, they would receive 2,000 cubits. A cubit is about 18 inches, okay? So 2,000 cubits surrounding their cities, 1,000 of empty lots, and 1,000 of fields and vineyards, right? So there was an area surrounding the city itself that the Levites had for pasturage and for planting. And it was considered part of the city, even though it was not built up. One may neither render a field an empty lot, nor an empty lot a field. Similarly, you cannot incorporate an empty lot into the city or render part of the city an empty lot. So the belt of land and the purposes for which that land was used could not be altered. You couldn't, expand or contract the town. But Rabbi Elazar said, in what case is this statement said? It applies to the cities of the Levites only. For a Levitical city, the zoning was very strict. In Levitical cities, the zoning was very strict. In the cities of the Israelites, there's a lot more leeway. You can take a field and turn it into an empty lot, right? It can become a field, can become grazing land. An empty lot can become a field, and you can incorporate an empty lot into a city, right? You can expand the city. But what you can't do, you can't render part of a city an empty lot. Why? In order to ensure that they will not thereby destroy the cities of Israel. Right? It might make more sense, financially for somebody to bulldoze. This is like urban renewal, but perhaps urban renewal gone awry, which it did. But this is a case where you can't tear down portions of the city that are already inhabited, because the idea is you don't want the cities of Israel to be destroyed. The Gemara goes into a lot of discussion about this, but that's in the Gemara, not here. Okay, the priests and the Levites may sell their fields and houses always and may redeem them all. We already covered that. As it is stated, this is from Leviticus 25, the Levites shall have a perpetual right of redemption. And Kohanim are considered Levi'im for this purpose. Kohanim are also members of the tribe of Levi, which is why if you do not have a Levi, the Kohen receives both the Kohen and the Levi aliyah. Kohanim are a subset of Levi. So a Kohen is a Kohen and by default a Levi. A Levi is not a Kohen, so that is why Kohanim have all of the perks and prerequisites of Levi'im, but also have additional strictures as well as additional privileges. So it's it's not just privileges, but other responsibilities. But basically, if the Levi'im have a certain right, the Kohanim have it as well. And that is the end of Arachin. And so we'll recite the Hadran prayer upon completing a tractate. Page 7. Hadran alach Masekhet Arakhin v'hadrach alan. Datan alach Masekhet Arachim v'datach alan. La nitnishe minach Masekhet Arachim v'la titnishi minan. Lav alma hadain v'lav alma de'ate. We will return to you, Masekhet Arakhin, and you will return to us. Our thoughts are about you, Masekhet Arakhin, and your thoughts are about us. We will not forget you, Masekhet Arakhin, and you will not forget us, not in this world and not in the world to come. Hadran alach Masekhet Arachin v'hadrach alan. Datan alach Masekhet Arachin v'datach alan. La nitnishe minach Masekhet Arachin v'la titnishi minan. Lav alma hadain v'lav alma da'ate. Yehi ratzon lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu, shitehei toratcha umanutenu va'olam hazeh, utehei imanu le'olam haba. Chanina bar Papa, Rami bar Papa, Nachman bar Papa, Achai bar Papa, Avimari bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa, Rachish bar Papa, Surchav bar Papa, Ada bar Papa, Daru bar Papa. Ha'erevna Adonai Eloheinu divrei toratcha befinu uv'fifiyot amcha veit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tze'etzaenu v'tze'etzei amcha veit Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lamdei toratecha lishma. May the words of Torah, Lord our God, be sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of all your people, so that we, our children, and all the children of the house of Israel may come to love you and want to study your Torah on its own merit. Through your commandments I am wiser than my enemies, for your commandments are ever with me. May my heart be filled with your laws in order that I not despair. May I never forget your laws, for by them I am kept alive. Blessed are you, God, who teaches me your laws. Amen, 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 Selah, forever. Modim anachnu lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei avotenu, shesamta chalkenu miyoshvei veit hamidrash v'lo samta chalkenu miyoshvei kranot. So anu mashkimim v'heim mashkimim. Anu mashkimim ledivrei Torah, v'heim mashkimim ledvarim v'telim. Anu amelim v'heim amelim. Anu amelim u'mekablim sachar, v'heim amelim v'einam mekablim sachar. Anu ratzim v'heim ratzim. Anu ratzim l'chayei ha'olam haba, v'heim ratzim liv'er shachat shene'amar, v'ata Elohim teridem liv'er shachat anshei damim u'mirma, lo yechetzu yemehem, v'ani evtach vach. Yehi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Elohai, Kishem she'azartani l'sayem Masekhet Arachin, kein ta'azreni lahatchil masechtot u'sfarim acherim u'l'saymam, lilmod u'lilamed l'shmor v'la'asot, u'l'kayem ekol divrei Talmud Toratecha b'yahava. May it be your will, my God, that as you have helped me finish Masekhet Arachin, so will you help me begin other Masechtot and books and finish them, to learn and to teach, to protect and fulfill all the words of your Torah with love. May the merit of all the Tanaim and Amoraim and scholars stand with me and for my progeny, so that the Torah does not leave my mouth and the mouth of my descendants forever. And may it be fulfilled through me. When you walk, she will guide you. When you lie down, she will protect you. And when you wake up, she will converse with you. For in me, your days will increase and years of life will be added for you. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left, wealth and honor. Adonai oz le'amar yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. God will give strength. God will bless God's nation with peace. Finally, we conclude with the special form of Kaddish recited only at the conclusion of a tractate. I'll invite those who can comfortably rise to do so. Page 9, you'll see the congregational responses in the green. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, v'alma dehu atid li'itcharata ula'achaya'a metaya, u'le'asaka l'chaye alma, u'lemivne karta d'Yerushalem, u'leshachlel hechle v'gava, u'mekar pulchana nuchra'a me'ar'a, u'la'atava pulchana dishmaya la'atre, Yam lich kutsha, b'richu b'malchute v'kareh, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayeh d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'galav izman kariv v'meru amen. Yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'olam le'omei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei d'kudishah. Brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran b'yoma v'yimeru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidehon, v'al kol Tamidehon, v'al kol man de'oskin v'oraita, di v'atra haden v'di v'cholatar v'atar, yehei lahon l'chon shlama rabba, china v'chista v'rachamin, V'chayin arechin mizona revicha, ufor kana min kodam avahon divishmaya, v'yimeru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, u'berachamav yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimeru amen. Shkoach to all of you for participating in the siyyum with your presence. There is a celebratory feast outside in the lobby with donuts, chocolate milk even, coffee, orange juice. Tonight's services are at 7:30 and tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Anybody who still needs to sell their chametz, please sign the form. It's in the reception area in the office. And Hag Sameach to everybody.
started further in the middle ages and so, and then when I found out, I actually only found out about it, about starting in the middle ages since I've been here.
Okay.
And in the early part when I first got to, just got here in Florida. And I said, damn, I know, I thought it was like way back there, but I've been doing it so long, I just keep it happening.
Well, you got